what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. And today we're going to be talking about our recap of the week. This is going to be Vlogmas Day 1. For the remainder of the month, I'm going to try for the entire month of December, there will be a video. So with that being said, let's jump right on in. So last night I got an update in regards to LAPD. Apparently they believe there is a serial killer on the loose. And this is because there has been fatal shootings of at least 3 fatal shootings in regards to homeless people. 3 separate incidents around LA. But they believe that there is a killer on the loose and it's raising alarm bells. So approximately there is about 46,000 people that they counted earlier this year that is homeless in Los Angeles, and they are trying to provide housing for them. Now, I'm not going to bat for this town, for this city or anything, but their homelessness is disgusting. 70% of the homeless population in Los Angeles are unsheltered and they sleep outside. So the first shooting in regards to this happened on the intersection of 110 or 110th Street and Vermont Ave in South LA. This person was shot at about 3:10 a.m. So this man ended up being 37-year-old Jose Bolanos. He died via a gunshot wound, and this happened in an alley. The next day, at about 4:45 a.m., the 600 block of Mateo Street, 62-year-old Mark Diggs was pushing a shopping cart, and then he had stopped because he had to charge his phone. And he was about to go to sleep, and then somebody shot him to death. The third incident happened at about 2:30 a.m., so Wednesday. So this happened on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And this happened at the intersection of 18th Ave and Pasadena Ave. That's in the community or neighborhood of Lincoln Heights. This is where the 52-year-old body of a man was found. His name has not been released because they're pending an identification with his family. So all 3 of them were out in the open. Each one was shot while they slept. This killer has basically no qualms when it comes to who he wants to kill, especially when it's out in the open. So this is like a thrill killer or a spree killer. So the only thing they have is that whoever this man is, which it said it's a man, was seen in a darker colored sedan. They don't know whether or not he acted alone or if others are involved. There is some forensics that the LAPD has been able to gather, but they have surveillance footage. They have some physical evidence that links this same man to all 3 crimes, but it's still ongoing at this time. And because they're trying to protect any potential victims, it's harder to capture this man because now he's aware that they have made a connection between the killings, and they're trying to prevent any more killings of any more homeless in the area. LAPD is also trying to make sure that the homeless population are all in one area together or in areas together. That way they have eyes everywhere. These shootings came out of nowhere, and it's pretty sad because these people, yes, they are homeless. Yes, some of them choose to remain homeless, even though they have means to not be homeless. Sometimes that's how it is. The homeless population here on the East Coast is the same way. If they choose to be homeless, they choose to be homeless. It's not something that we can control. Peng Lee was just working his normally scheduled shift for a restaurant when these men placed an order at the restaurant that he worked in order to lure him to where they were. So there's security footage that shows Cheng Li getting into, or these people getting into Cheng Li's car. And apparently there was a struggle that happened between someone in the car, is what it shows on security footage. Cheng Li then was reported missing just 2 days after this. So it is assumed that he was abducted and then he eventually was murdered. Any cell phone data and his license plate has been tracked, or any of who they believe kidnapped him. Everything has been tracked. And so far, it shows that their movements happened between New York City and Massachusetts and led to New Hampshire. So it's believed that there are 5 men from New York City that kidnapped Cheng Li, beat him, killed him, and buried him here in New Hampshire. It's believed that Cheng Li has been buried in Twin Mountains. So all 5 of these men are facing kidnapping and murder charges for the connection of this crime. 2 men plus 3 accomplices were planning to hold Cheng Li for ransom and then burying him. And it's obvious that they were looking for somewhere rural. That way it was outside of New York. That's why they came to New Hampshire, unfortunately, because more north you go, the more rural it is. So what they decided to do is they ended up pinpointing where one of the captors' cell phones is. His name is Dongxing Zhang, and the other one is Dong Lu. They were able to ping a location to Zhang's phone close to where the shallow grave was. Determined that 3 days after the kidnapping, so a day after Cheng Li was reported missing, that they discovered his body in Twin Mountain. He had multiple injuries, a fractured skull, and he unfortunately was naked. And the pinpoint to Zhang's cell phone location was close by. It is also believed that they were stopped on the highway and they were approached by a trooper, a New Hampshire state trooper. The interaction on the body cam was caught, and I believe that has been taken into evidence as well. All 5 of them are in custody. They're not just facing charges for kidnapping resulting in death, they're also facing charges for either drug possession or a different drug charge at this time. If they're convicted of these crimes, they could face life in prison or the death penalty. Unfortunately, New Hampshire does not have an active death penalty. If they did, they would all hang. Our state death penalty is hanging. The last noose that was used in the state of New Hampshire is actually hanging up in the State House in Concord. I've seen it. It's actually really cool. It's in a glass enclosure. I know that sounds really morbid, but it's very true. Right, so there's this new documentary or docuseries by ABC News Studios that either came out or is coming out. It's called Wild Crime Blood Mountain, and it goes into the death of Meredith Emerson. Meredith Emerson went for a hike with her dog, Ella, in Vogel State Park, and she never returned. This was on New Year's Day of 2008. Obviously, investigation, they searched everywhere for her. They uncovered the possible connection that other missing people were reported missing in these areas, and apparently there is a suspect. Of course, this documentary solely focuses on Meredith Emerson's case, but it also tells the story of how they think there is actually a serial killer in this area, which is really cool. Apparently, there are several witnesses that saw a strange man hiking behind Emerson the day she went missing. There's a numerous amount of tips that came in who saw her walking her dog that day on the trail, and that there was this man behind her. Apparently, this man was wearing a bayonet on his belt. He had a police-style baton with him. He had a very expensive hiking gear, and he was in his 50s or 60s. One person said they couldn't fathom or shake the idea of why he had duct tape on his shoes. thought process for me of why he had duct tape on his shoes is that he didn't want his tracks to be followed. If you cover the imprints on the bottom with duct tape, it's not going to give a clear imprint when you step somewhere. It's also said that he was spotted near a white van and he was wearing a yellow jacket. There's actually an image of him. Somebody took a picture of him. About 2 days after Meredith Emerson disappeared, they got a call from North Carolina where it heightened their fear for her case. In North Carolina, there was this, well, now he's a retired agent, but a special agent, Harold Young Jr., and he worked with the United States Forest Service. He was investigating the disappearance of two people, a married couple, Irene and John Bryant. So Irene was 84 and John was 80. They went missing when they were in the Pisgah, Pisgah. I'm going to say Pisgah. The Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. They disappeared in October of 2007, just a few months before the disappearance of Meredith Emerson. This couple, experienced hikers, just like Meredith Emerson. Their remains were found on November 10th. Well, the remains of Irene were found. His remains are still missing. Less than a month later, her remains were found. The investigator, or when the special agent interviewed some people that were in the park the same day, they described a man who had a white van and a police baton. So there tends to be, there's that correlation between one another. That's not all. The investigator for Meredith Emerson's case also got word from Florida. In 2007, there's a missing persons case from the Apalachicola National Forest. This is near Tallahassee. Cheryl Dunlap, who's 46, she went missing on December 3rd of 2007. So not very long prior to Meredith Emerson going missing. So Cheryl was reported missing after she failed to report to her job. She was a nurse. Her car was found on the side of the road, abandoned. On the 15th of December, they found remains in the forest, and there was no head on these remains. They would conduct a DNA test, and this was indeed Cheryl Dunlap. So they had very minimal to go on, other than what they think this dude looks like. He has a white van, and he has police stuff. While in pursuit of this man, they also got reports that somebody was using her ATM card shortly after she had indeed disappeared. So obviously we have to kind of think or assume there's tons of forest in this area. So you can imagine there's a lot of ground that needs to be covered, especially when it comes to Meredith Emerson or with John Bryant. There's a lot of area that they need to look through in order to clarify exactly where any remains potentially could be. They do believe John Tabor called the police, so they do believe they have an idea of exactly who could potentially be involved in Meredith Emerson's case, and this is a man named Gary Michael Hilton. So Gary Michael Hilton has been arrested a few times for misdemeanors and has been known to be aggressive. So this break came from a man named John Tabor. He called investigators after he heard about certain details about this man who was the person of interest. Of course, when they're on the phone or when they're conversing, Tabor describes Gary Hilton and talks about how he, at the end of his employment when they worked together, Hilton was extremely scary. He was violent and volatile, and he fired him because obviously it's a great idea at the time. You have somebody that's very belligerent and volatile in the workplace, it's not a smart idea. So soon after this, Hilton's image obviously is released, and then the investigators would be contacted by Hilton's attorney, Samuel Rayel. So Samuel Rayel said that he and his client are actually working on a direct-to-video movie called Deadly Run, which is about a serial killer who hunts women in the woods. Go figure. So strange. It still brings up the idea that and how they're trying to connect Hilton to Cheryl Dunlap's murder, the murder of Irene Bryant and the disappearance of John Bryant. The thought still remains, is he a serial killer, or is he just a novice director who wants to shoot a movie about a serial killer in the woods? I don't really know, because it's all very just, yeah. So I wanted to include this, even though these cases are a little bit older, but it's something that is coming out now, and it's very intriguing. I'm very excited to watch this and to really, it says it's streaming now on Hulu, so I'm very excited to take a deep dive into it to really learn a little bit more about this man and more about Meredith Emerson's case, obviously the Bryant's case, and with Cheryl Dunlap, and if there's any more victims. So also to clarify, a serial killer is a person that has 3 or more victims. Once you hit your 3rd victim, technically you're a serial killer. That is why this is a serial killer. So if anybody is kind of curious about that, that's why. The last thing I want to talk about is actually Ruby Franke. I have not spoken about this woman on my channel, and that is for a reason. I think she's disgusting. I think what happened is disgusting. But the reason why I want to talk about it is because her husband filed for divorce. Kevin Franke filed for divorce from his wife. So if you don't know, Ruby Franke and her business partner, Jody Hildebrandt, were arrested back on August 30th. And this is for multiple counts of child abuse, felony child abuse. So 2 of her children were found completely malnourished and emaciated in Hildebrandt's home. This home is in Ivins, Utah. At this time, Kevin Franke has not been charged with any crime. If you don't know who Ruby Franke is, she used to have a channel called 8 Passengers because her and her husband have 6 children. Now, what kind of is strange for me is I thought they were LDS. And generally speaking, couples that are LDS cannot file for divorce because they are sealed to one another, which I think is very interesting. Ruby Franke, obviously, she had her channel. All of this controversy with child abuse has started back in 2020 when people would call child services on them due to her parenting practices. She's very strict. She stopped posting on 8 Passengers, and then she joined Jody Hildebrandt on a podcast called Connections. So on Connections, she would talk about the way she parents. And the way she parents is not in the conventional way. I will just say that. And of course, it's not the conventional way because of how we found 2 of her children. So the 911 call came in after a young child went to a neighbor's house and they had signs of being bound and wounds on their body. Well, after the police arrived at that house, then the police went to Hildebrandt's home to check on the children. That's when they found another child that was covered in wounds. So it was her 12-year-old that came to the 911 caller's home, and his arm, he was covered in duct tape, and he was asking for food and water because he was hungry. Apparently, his parents has been separated for about a year under the ruse of Ruby. I also saw a video about them where it said that they were going through couples counseling or couples counseling through Connections, but she moved out with her kids out of their home and moved into her partner's home, Jody Hildebrandt. There is speculation, too, that she was actually romantically involved with Jody Hildebrandt, but I'm just speculating. That's just what I've read. I don't know if for sure that's an actual thing. That would actually make a lot of sense because she's a very strange woman. Anywho, so that is kind of the update for Ruby Franke, and with her husband filing for a divorce. I know that the whole thing is pretty messy, obviously, with the child abuse arrests and stuff like that, and it just, yeah, it's not any case that involves child abuse is not good. It's not, especially when one of your older children is so happy that finally something is happening. This same child is the one that you forced to try and mother your children while you were still in the home. Like, Apparently, there was a video where she took everything out of her son's room and made him sleep on like the floor or something because he did something wrong or made fun of his little brother. That's your child. I know some parents parent differently, but that's your child. Why are you going to do that to your child? I love my children. I love them. God gave me my children for a reason. I would do anything for them. I don't know how one's brain can go to that point of, I need to severely hurt my child so they understand how I function. I don't understand. My brain can't understand that. My brain doesn't understand that. It hurts physically to realize that people do that to their children. I know I sound like a very, I don't know, or a very like God-fearing woman right now, but I am a religious woman. I don't blast it everywhere, but at the same time, your children are a blessing. Why? I don't understand it. So that, my friends, is the end of this true crime roundup. I do have a ton of John and Jane Doe cases that have been identified, and I'm going to have them for individual days instead of putting them in here. I believe I have about 10 of them that have been identified, or ones that weren't publicly acknowledged within the month of November, that I will be adding into Vlogmas. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys tomorrow in my next video.